is Miss Jessica and welcome to Introductory Ballet. Today I will be teaching you the 5 positions of the feet. As a disclaimer, I am trained in Saggy Ballet, which means that if you're trained in another style, these names and positions might be slightly different than the ones you're used to. So the first position that we teach anyone, mainly the younger children, so ages 2, 3, and 4, is actually an unofficial 6th position called parallel. And the reason it's called this is it's the only position that we are not in a turned out position. We are in parallel, thus the name. So parallel is when we have our toes and our heels touching one another and our knees facing forwards. It's very important that in whatever position we're in, our knees are always over our toes, as that will decrease the risk of injury to the inside of our knees. This is also another reason why we start younger kids in parallel position, because we don't want them to injure themselves. The next position that we'll teach is first position. Very similar to parallel, but we have our heels together and our toes apart. And our entire legs are in a turned out position, so again our knees are over our toes. This is introduced usually around the ages of 5, but is also used in introductory ballet in all ages going up into adults. The next position that we will teach is second position. So second position is very similar to first in that everything is aligned with one another. So your heels are in line with each other and your toes are in line with each other. I like to gauge the width of my second position by putting my heels underneath my hip bones or my sits bones on my bum. So that allows me to make sure that I'm not too wide. When I'm too wide, it's going to be harder for me to go through my positions and rise up onto those toes. And if I'm too close, it becomes looking like a wide first position, which we don't want. So second position, just underneath the hips. And again, this is introduced about the same level as first position. So your ages 5 and up into adulthood. The next position we teach is third position. Third position is very similar to first position, but what we're going to do is we're just going to cross one foot over just a little bit. So in my ballet shoes, I like to use my elastics as a gauge, but if you're not wearing ballet shoes, it's essentially just where the arch of your foot comes up nice and high. And I just put my heel in line with the arch of my foot, and that's my third position. Third position we usually will introduce once kids have started to be able to gauge their turnout muscles and be able to hold their turnout without letting their knees fall in. Because again, we don't want them injuring themselves. This is also a position that we will introduce for adults that are first learning how to cross their legs over in order to make sure we have alignment. But more advanced dancers will tend to use fifth position instead of third, which will be the next position I will teach you. Before I do that, one thing that's very important about third position is that we are making sure that our belly button continues to face forwards as well as our hips. We don't want to be twisting into this open gap because that'll again put pressure on the front of that knee and will lead to injury. So that's another reason why we wait to introduce it. The next position we teach is fifth position. Very similar to third, as you can see, third is very much a building step. So fifth position, how I gauge it is the little notch in between the knuckle on my foot and my big toe. I just put my heel right in that notch, and that's how far I cross my fifth position. Something that you'll often see with professional dancers is that position where their feet are lying flat on one another. But that's a position that you can only hit if you have a 180-degree turnout. This depends on how your hips are built, so some people won't even be able to get this level of turnout even with many years of experience. So I do not have a 180-degree turnout, and that's why there's a gap between my front toe and my back heel. If I were to turn out all the way, I again risk injury to my knees. So work with the turnout that you have, and make sure that you're not pushing too far. So if you have less turnout, it'll probably look a little more pointed forwards than what I have, which is not a lot for a dancer, but probably more than beginners. The last position that we teach is introduced much later, so it is not for beginners necessarily. It's a good thing to learn, but it takes a lot of control over our muscles, which is why we tend to wait. And this is fourth position. Fourth position has two different variations. It has fourth crossed and fourth open. So since I'm in fifth, fourth crossed is aligned with fifth position, where it's just my foot is slightly forwards. So it's the same alignment as fifth, but just slightly forwards. The reason that we wait to introduce this position is that it's very easy to be turning into that open gap, and we really risk injury to that front leg, which is why we tend to wait to introduce it. Depending on how your hips are built, some people may have a wider fourth than others. My fourth is very short, so if I am to turn sideways, you'll see that I actually have very little space between my 2 feet, and that's because I don't have a very wide fourth for the ability of my hips. Some people are able to open it a lot more, but for my hips to sit properly and straight up and down, I need to keep it quite small. And then our last position is fourth open, which is across from first position. So from first position, we're just going to slide forward. So our heels are in line, but our toes are apart. So it's a lot less crossed, and that's why it's fourth open instead of fourth crossed.